This time of year, as most of us know, is the major time for introspection regarding teams that missed or are out of the playoffs at this point. While some GMs have more questions than others, it's almost certain that every team will at least be making minor adjustments here and there. However, there's a handful of teams that we'll be addressing on this list that have just more than minor adjustments to make. In this video, we'll be going over some franchise players that could be traded or signed elsewhere here shortly. And with that, here are 5-star players that could be on new teams by next season. Ever since former Sharks GM Doug Wilson signed Erik Karlsson to an albatross of a contract back in 2019, it was almost common knowledge that eventually this move would catch up with them. And now, since forward Thomas Hertl has been signed by the Sharks, since they missed the playoffs now for the 3rd season straight, they'll likely be looking to shake things up. Looking at their cap situation, to be a non-contender and still have close to $20 million next season going to 2 right-side defensemen, it's probably not the ideal situation to be in. Curtis Pelcheka of the Mercury News recently wrote that acting GM Joe Will is open to trade conversations on Erik Karlsson and Brent Burns. Karlsson, who will be making $11.5 million a season until 2027, has a full no move clause. Even though obviously he could waive it, the most logical player to try and trade between them is Brent Burns. Burns, at 37 years of age, has still been contributing for the Sharks on the back end. With 54 points in a full season's play, even though he's not in the Norris conversation anymore, the defenseman can still produce. Despite not having a full no-move clause, however, Burns still has a modified no-trade clause that allows for a 3-team trade list to be submitted. Even though it wouldn't be the easiest deal to pull, NHL insider Elliotte Friedman believes it could still be doable. Friedman also cited a source from The Athletic that said that last year, around this time, Burns said that he was open to a trade if it meant he'd have a chance at chasing a Stanley Cup. Burns, whose contract is shorter and is of less value than Karlsson's, would still be difficult to move on the market. The contract that sports an AAV of $8 million until 2025 would seem much more attractive if San Jose was able to find a third-party team to eat half of the salary, presumably. And for possible suitors, the Dallas Stars could be a fit for Burns, especially if they do lose John Klingberg. Putting him on the second line at reduced salary, it would pretty much be around what Klingberg made last season. Out of all the players on this list, the one receiving the most attention this offseason so far has to be Jets center Mark Scheifele. After the Winnipeg Jets finished as one of the most disappointing teams of the season, there's been more speculation than ever that Scheifele has played his last game as a Jet. GM Kevin Cheveldayoff, however, recently made his intentions clear to try and keep Scheifele and would only be trading him if he felt forced. But many are speculating that it may not be entirely the GM's idea if Scheifele is shipped elsewhere. Following the team's final win of the season against the Seattle Kraken, many things then became clear during the post-game interviews amongst the team. For one, there seemed to be some friction between veteran Paul Stastny and Scheifele that had seeped out behind closed doors. And secondly, Scheifele's comments indicated that he wasn't 100% committed either way. I just have to know. I just have to understand where the team is going. I'm in the prime of my career. I like the physical nature that my body is at. I'm only improving. I'm only getting better. And I'm only going to be a better player next year than I was this year. I just have to know where this team is going, what the direction is, and what changes are going to be, if any, Scheifele says. Summing that up, it seems like the forward may be wanting a change of scenery if the right changes aren't made to his liking this offseason. Right now, Scheifele is set to enter his second to last year of his 8-year, $49 million deal with an AAV of $6.125 million. Even though he did finish second in scoring, however, last season with 70 points, Scheifele finished with the worst plus-minus out of the entire team, leaving us to presume that he could have been part of the problem regarding the Jets' inability to keep pucks out of their own nets. Thinking about teams that could use a bona fide number 1 center, the Minnesota Wild, Columbus Blue Jackets, and the New York Rangers all come to mind. If the Rangers lose Ryan Strome, that is. Either way, Scheifele has said that he hasn't submitted a trade request yet, therefore we'll have to await his fate. Recently, as we witnessed the Pittsburgh Penguins season come to a close, the focus immediately thereafter shifted to Chris Letang and Evgeny Malkin. Well, you probably know the story. two players that have been around a while supporting Sidney Crosby, who both have expiring contracts. Even though we've been hearing mixed things about potential extensions, one thing is for certain, it's going to be impossible for GM Ron Hextall to re-sign everyone. Brian Rust, Evan Rodriguez, Rickard Rakell are just a few other pending UFAs on the roster to address. For Malkin, whose 8-year, $76 million contract is set to expire this offseason, the issue seems to be more related to value rather than term. Elliot Friedman recently echoed this while saying on his 32 Thoughts podcast that Malkin and the Penguins were far apart on the dollar amount of the proposed extension. While looking at a recent article from Pennsburg, we can see what some comparable contracts for Malkin look like. Considering his age and injury history, it seems like a fair amount is between the $6.5 to $7.5 million range, which is more than Penguins insider Rob Rossi claimed Hextall offered the center earlier. Even though Malkin has been open with his intentions to stay, the main question is, will he? If number 71 were to take his talents elsewhere, a couple teams that make sense for Malkin are the Anaheim Ducks and Boston Bruins. Anaheim has already lost veteran center Ryan Getzlaf to retirement, but still has a young, talented core that could help regalvanize Malkin's game. Boston may be losing Patrice Bergeron even though they've already been weaker at center since departing with David Krejci. Anaheim may have more to offer as far as prospects are concerned, and Hextall made a trade recently with Pat Verbeek, so there could be some rapport there as well. Speaking of Anaheim, one player that could be seeking a change of scenery in Orange County is netminder John Gibson. After witnessing a slew of pending UFAs being dealt elsewhere, and Captain Ryan Getzlaf announcing his retirement, it's rather uncertain at this point whether or not Gibson wants to stick around for a potential rebuild. At 28 years of age, the goaltender has proven to be for multiple seasons now amongst the elite league-wide. Even though his team has had its struggles, most of us watching can agree that Gibson has been one of the best players on the roster for quite some time. Currently approaching his third year of his 8-year, $51.2 million contract, Gibson is set to make an AAV of $6.4 million until 2027. Even though he does have a modified no-trade clause, the clause itself would be easy to work with. In the event of a trade, Gibson would submit a 10-team no-trade list, leaving 21 other possible destinations on the table. As far as potential destinations, a recent article from The Athletic proposed an intriguing possibility. The article went on to suggest, which I'll link below, that Gibson could be the perfect piece for a contending team that's almost there, but just needs that piece in net. The suggested team that could trade for him is the Edmonton Oilers. Thinking about it, the Oilers have been making strides in the right direction. They hired Jay Woodcroft, who's been a good addition, recently made the second round of the playoffs for the first time in 5 years. So in that regard, the team looks like it's heading in the right direction. However, the main concern that's plagued the Oil for season upon season has been in net. For GM Ken Holland, if he can somehow either get Anaheim to retain some salary or can rid the books of the Zach Kassian contract, this could free up the needed space in order to bring Gibson in. Knowing that Holland has some players to re-sign, taking one or both of these approaches could allow for it to happen. Let Koskinen walk and trade Mike Smith elsewhere. I guess you could say that it doesn't take a genius to know that Hall is not well in the Windy City. Following a very disappointing season full of controversy, the Blackhawks may be looking to turn a major page this offseason, meaning that they could finally be moving the two remaining players from the dynasty years back in the 2010s. While we did recently discuss the potential for Captain Jonathan Toews to be traded, it's been a hot minute since we talked about Patrick Kane. Despite being in his mid-30s, Kane has been playing at a consistent pace and remains as one of the best stick handlers in the game today. However, it's pretty clear that his long-term team is seeking to rebuild, which has put Kane in a rather awkward position. Even though he hasn't been as vocal as Toews regarding his thoughts on the ordeal, Kane has voiced a desire to retire as a Blackhawk. But if Toews were to depart, would that change his attitude? Regardless, Kane has a full no-move clause and would have to give his consent. With the remaining season on his contract that sports a $10.5 million AAV, the only way the man they call Showtime is going to be moved is with reduced salary. Last deadline, there was reported interest from league GMs already inquiring about Kane, according to NHL insider Dave Pagnotta. Elliot Friedman also echoed the sentiment and even reported that the New York Rangers were one of the teams that asked about Kane's services. Kane, who had undeniable chemistry with winger Artemi Panarin, would be a dream trade piece, most likely for Rangers fans. With Nazem Kadri and Andrei Burakovsky as both pending UFAs for Colorado, you have to wonder about that fit as well.